Hey guys, this is Daniel from What Plays, and today I'm going to talk about my first impressions of the AYANEO Pocket ACE. I've had this since last week, but was wrapping up my silent mods video, so I didn't have time to set this device up until yesterday. By the way, if you haven't already, you should check that video out. I go super in-depth into why handheld buttons are loud and clacky and how you can fix them. But I've been messing with the Pocket Ace for a few hours, mostly just setting it up and trying a few games out, and testing some of the current issues the community has reported. And yes, I was able to reproduce some of these issues, and I'll go into detail later on in the video. I have the Retro Power model, which has 16GB of memory and 1TB of storage. All Pocket Ace models come with a Snapdragon G3x Gen 2, which is the same chip in the Pocket Evo, so it can emulate everything you can currently emulate on Android and play all your Android games at max settings. The screen is a 4.5-inch 1620x1080 IPS display with a 3:2 aspect ratio and 550 nits of brightness. We've got LPDDR5X RAM clocked at 8533 MHz, UFS 4.0 storage, a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, a 6000 mAh battery, Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.3, fingerprint sensor, and it's running Android 13. This is also AYANEO's first handheld to use what they're calling their Surge linear motor, and while it feels great, I'll also give my thoughts about that as well. But for now, let's unbox this thing and see what we get. Before we get started, I bought this with my own money on Indiegogo. All opinions are my own, and AYANEO did not send this to me early or for free. They don't even know I exist. I've technically already unboxed this, but that was just to put the screen protector on, so let's see what else comes in the box. The outer wrapper has the Retro Power model displayed, and on the back it has the model and specs. If we take that off, we get a generic white model box, and removing the top cover and foam, we can see the device right away. Taking it out, my immediate reaction was that it's got some weight to it, but it doesn't feel heavy. It's a bit thick, but I would say it's just 2 C's thick, not 3 C's. The plastic feels great, and I know people like to hate on the AYANEO smudgy plastics, but to me they feel the most premium for other devices on the market. If you don't like seeing fingerprints, the white or Retro Power version will be your best bet. The back is clean with just a fan port, and the micro SD card door is on the right side of the device and sits flush when closed. Retro Pocket Mini. Digging into the rest of the box, we've got some recyclable materials, and under that we have a smaller box with a USB-C cable and alternative thumbsticks. These stick caps are much bigger than the stock ones and should make it a little more comfortable if you're playing something stick-centric. It looks like they use the same stick base as Retroid and AYN. My thought was you might be able to use those sticks or third-party sticks from Etsy. Taking a cap from the RP Mini V2, and yeah, it looks like it does fit on the Ace, and the same with the Odin sticks. So you can either borrow from another device or buy some stick caps off Etsy. I also bought some accessories, including these rubber thumbstick caps made specifically for the Ace. I have similar caps on my Evo full time and they feel great, and trying these on the Ace, yeah, they feel great to use as well. Really enhances the grip. My thumbs tend to slip off most default stick caps, so I'm always buying these rubber caps, and I like the look of both, so I'll have to see what I like better, using these caps or just using the bigger sticks. Next we have the grip. We've got the Real Gamers No Gamers slogan cut out inside, and it's got cutouts for all the top controls. This grip is not a TPU grip, it's hard plastic, but very thin so it's still flexible and should be easy to get on and off. Looks like we can insert the device from the bottom and slide the top lip over and it all snaps into place. Initial impressions are that it feels good, it's made of a similar plastic as the device, so the feel is mostly consistent. It doesn't interfere with the triggers, which is good, so you still have full range of motion there. I would say it does add some more grip, but I'm not sure it's actually necessary, and I'll talk more about that in the ergonomics section. I did try to see if we could reverse the grip and use it as a front cover, but the trigger bulge prevents the top lip from fully snapping into place, so I wouldn't try to use it like that. Setting that aside, I also got 2 cases, what they're calling the mini satchel bag and the trendy storage bag. Taking a look at the mini satchel first, we've got this adjustable shoelace type shoulder strap, and inside there's a small Velcro pocket. With the grip, the Ace is a bit of a tight fit, but it does fit, and it has a magnetic closure which is nice. It's cool, but I personally won't be using this, it definitely looks more like a purse. Now for the trendy storage bag, this is something I will definitely use. The wrist strap is removable, and the zipper pull is embossed with AYANEO, which is a nice detail. The front pocket is magnetic, the zipper is a seam sealed waterproof type. It's not YKK, but it's good enough for something that won't be under much stress. Inside we have a similar Velcro pocket for your charging cable. Putting the device in, we have much more room and it doesn't feel cramped. I like how thin this case is, very travel friendly, and the fabric is coated so it feels very smooth and premium. I much prefer this over the satchel bag, even if I were to remove the shoulder strap. I also got two screen protectors. One is a full-size one that covers the entire front glass, which I already installed, and I have a spare screen-sized one just in case. Moving on to the controls, let's start with the ABXY buttons. In terms of feel, these buttons use a rubber membrane connection and feel great. The membrane is fairly stiff, so the buttons have great travel and are thunky and feel great to press on. I do wonder if my fingers will get tired after a long gaming session, but I don't think it'll be an issue since they feel similar to the Pocket Evo and I can play that handheld for hours. These buttons also don't rub against the shell, so you won't see scrape marks develop over time like on the Pocket Evo or RP Mini. The D-pad is also a rubber membrane connection and is the same size as the Pocket Evo's D-pad, just with a more squared off and sharper design. Pressing in any direction feels fine, but I do wonder if the sharp corners and edges will dig into my thumb after a while. I'll have to do more testing to see. The Pocket Ace passes the contra test with flying colors. If I just rock the D-pad a little bit, the character barely moves, if at all. And if I press more, I get the diagonal I'm expecting. This D-pad is also Hadoukenable and Shoryukenable. Here we're in Street Fighter Alpha 3 on GBA, and I can do my quarter and half circle moves just fine. It's a bit of a challenge to do the double quarter circle Shoryuken, but take that with a grain of salt since I don't play fighting games. Playing a more precision-based 2D game like Metroid Zero Mission also seems to work well, so I'm feeling really good about this D-pad. Again, we'll just have to see how the sharper corners and edges feel over time compared to the Evo. The analog sticks are kind of like much improved Switch sticks, are Hall effect and again have swappable caps. Even though they're small sticks, you can still get fine-grained input, which is useful for walking across narrow logs in God of War. I did notice that the stick will rub against the device when pushed all the way. I'm not sure if this is just because I have a screen protector on it. I didn't test this before I installed it. Otherwise, I initially had some issues with the stick calibration, where my left stick wasn't reaching full digital range. A quick calibration resolved that issue, so I would make sure your sticks are properly calibrated. The shoulders and triggers have this light olive green colorway and look great, and the triggers don't stick out too much. The shoulders and LC and RC buttons definitely feel like dome switches, soft clicky and tactile, but not loud clicky like micro switches. The LC and RC buttons are programmable, and LC defaults to the Android app switcher and RC is the back button. The triggers have a good range of motion for their size and are also Hall effect. However, there is a fair bit of inner and outer dead zone, reducing the available range. In Forza Horizon 5, I can feather the gas or brake, but it does feel like I go from low to full throttle pretty quickly. Also, the trigger pad itself is smooth, and I wish AYANEO had put some kind of texture on the trigger pad. Because they are so small, my concern is that my finger would slip off when I don't want it to, but I'll do more testing for my final review. Rounding out the controls are the buttons along the bottom row. On the left, we have a programmable home button, which can act as an Xbox or Steam button if you're doing game streaming, and a turbo button to quickly cycle through the power profiles. On the right, we have the AYANEO button, which brings up the overlay and sticks out a bit from the device so it's easy to find, and then the Android home button. Let's do a quick sound test. The ABXY buttons are fairly quiet at around 44 decibels and aren't very clacky. If we keep our finger on the button to simulate a button mashing game, it gets about 20% quieter at around 41 dB, so for practical use it's not bad. I don't like brushing across face buttons as a loudness test because every device will sound loud, but if that's something you're curious about, as expected they do get pretty loud when you do that. The bottom row buttons are essentially silent, maybe a dB above ambient. The D-pad is a little weird. Left and down are about 40 dB, but up and right are 42 dB, but not clacky. Start and select buttons are also silent. Shoulders are about 43 dB, nice and tactile with a good click. I'll see what I can do about modding this to make it even quieter when I make my teardown video, so subscribe if you want to see that. Okay, let's power this on and go through the setup. I always find it funny that AYANEO always has to let you know you're running a Snapdragon APU when you boot up. First thing I did was run through the setup, join Wi-Fi and sign into Google Play. Then I ran system updates and AYANEO updates. I use Emulation Station Desktop Edition as my front end with the Canvas theme. It's a pretty utilitarian theme that lets me navigate my systems in a grid. I did add all my ROMs, but I haven't scraped box art yet. AYANEO does have their ISpace launcher, which you can access by holding down the AYANEO button, but I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I would much rather stick with ESDE. If we single click the AYANEO button, we get their overlay, which I do like a lot. On the Performance tab, we can see our CPU and GPU temps, fan and FPS, change our performance profiles, and enable the performance overlay. The Controller tab lets you configure things like vibration, linear or digital triggers, adjust the stick sensitivity, and swap the ABXY layout between Xbox and Nintendo. The Device tab has controls for screen brightness, sound, and toggling the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The Toggle tab has a bunch of little widgets you can use, and I don't think you can customize this. I personally don't really use it. And on the Settings tab, we can check for updates and access system settings and IA setting. IA setting is where we can fully customize the performance characteristics for each profile, and the Controller tab is where you can calibrate the sticks. The Device tab is where you can smooth the device to make it appear like another Android phone, and where you can adjust the fan curve. There's not much to do on the other tabs, but the System Update tab is where you'll find updates to AYANEO's apps like IA Window and IA Setting. Now let's talk about the screen. Right off the bat, I want to say initial impressions, this is a really good IPS panel. I like the 3:2 aspect ratio, which is a good middle ground between 4:3 and 16:9, but the one thing is that even though this aspect ratio is perfect for GBA, this 1620x1080 resolution doesn't cleanly integer scale to GBA. Instead, it's a 6.75 integer scale. If we take a look at the difference between the default fill scaling on Pokemon Unbound, we can see that since the resolution is so high, the pixels will overall look pretty balanced. If we enable integer scaling, our pixels will be perfect squares, but that introduces letterboxing and doesn't look very good. And again, it's pretty hard to tell between the two because the resolution is so high, and I think I'd rather just do non-integer scaling and use an LCD grid shader. If we switch over to Mega Man X on SNES, we can see the life bar isn't perfectly balanced. It's probably more subtle than on lower resolution screens, but we can fix that in two ways. We could apply the CRT one-tap shader or something similar, and now the life bar is much more balanced. It's still not perfect, but if you like the CRT look, this might be good enough for you. We could also enable integer scaling and get those perfect pixels, but with letterboxing. But a better option that specifically works great for SNES is to use integer scaling, but set it to overscale, which will integer scale beyond the screen and cut off a little bit of the top and bottom. SNES was designed to work with both 4:3 and 8:7, so developers designed games to account for part of the screen getting cut off. Now we get the benefits of integer scaling without letterboxing. Moving on to screen brightness, this gets decently bright. I think it's acceptable if you're playing in indirect sunlight, like in the shade, but this definitely does not get bright enough to play in direct sunlight. My camera won't show it that well, but it also gets fairly dim. It might not be the darkest screen, but I would feel comfortable playing this in bed next to the wife. One of the issues that was reported in Discord was a misaligned screen where their screen was crooked when mounted, and luckily it looks like my unit doesn't have this issue, so I hope that was an isolated issue. Another community concern was light bleed, and it all came about when there were these pictures posted on the Chinese social network Bilibili. Looking at these pictures, it would appear that the Ace has what I would consider an unacceptable level of light bleed, which is very distracting. Light bleed in IPS panels is common and just a consequence of the panel design, so to some extent there will always be a bit of light bleed. However, I think this is a non-issue, and I'll explain why. It looks like these pictures were taken in low light with what I assume is a phone, and phones will pump up the ISO in low light to maintain a balanced exposure when taking a photo. When you boost the ISO, it makes what in reality would be a small bit of light bleed look like a significant issue. I'll demonstrate with my device. Here I have most of my studio lights off and the screen brightness is set to 100%. This website will help us test light bleed and show a black screen when I tap here. My camera's base ISO for video recording is 1000, so here's what it looks like at my normal exposure settings. I can see a little bit of light bleed on the left side, mostly centered on the D-pad and left analog stick, but I'm not sure it's coming through on camera. If we pump up the ISO to 4000, then you can start to see the light bleed on camera. If we go to ISO 8000 or even 12800, now it looks like the Bilibili pictures. Until I specifically started trying to test a light bleed, I didn't even notice any light bleed with the games I had already tried. So I think this issue is mostly overblown and not indicative of what your real-world experience would be with this device. And again, this is at 100% brightness and you probably wouldn't be playing at that all the time. This website also has a dead pixel test, so I ran through all the colors and no issues here. I know the first thought people will have is that this screen should have been OLED, and I also would have liked to see an OLED display. I've definitely been spoiled by the Pocket Evo's screen. However, the Pocket Ace's screen is no slouch here. The black levels are actually very good, at least in my opinion. I've been playing through Ghost of Tsushima in Kurosawa mode, which is basically their black and white mode. You can see here the whites are definitely washed out on the Ace's screen compared to the Evo's OLED, and the blacks also don't have as good definition. Obviously this wouldn't look as good as it would on OLED, but it's still definitely playable. Here's a comparison of the Horizon Chase startup screen. You be the judge, but to me the colors look basically equivalent, which really goes to show how good the colors look on the Ace. If I had to nitpick, the Ace might be ever so slightly less saturated and washed out compared to the Evo, but it's so subtle you would have a hard time telling the difference. The Pocket Ace has dual front-firing speakers, which is a nice contrast from past devices like the Evo and Micro, which have downward-firing speakers. Here's a sound test with the Horizon Chase theme song, starting with 100% volume, then at around 50%. It gets pretty loud at around 93 decibels at max volume, but you can definitely hear distortion. 50% is around 86 dB and sounds much better. These sound good to me, but I'm not a sound expert, so don't trust my ears. I'll let you be the judge if it sounds good to you. I do like how the speakers are inward enough that your palms won't cover them, which shows attention to detail on AYANEO's part. Retro systems like GBA and SNES will run a solid 60 FPS, no surprises there, and we could probably even bump it down to the Eco profile. Yoshi's Island on SNES looks great with integer overscale with minimal black bars. Pokemon Unbound on GBA looks great scaled up with the LCD grid shader. God of War Chains of Olympus on the PSP at a 4x upscale runs at a stable 60 FPS. The Ace crushes Sega Rally Championship on Saturn, running at 60 FPS on the RetroArch Yabasanshiro core. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on GameCube with Dolphin Standalone runs at 60 FPS at a 3x upscale, and I did bump it up to the game profile. No issues with God of War on PS2, 60 FPS with a 2.5x upscale on Balanced. For higher-end emulation, Metroid Prime Remastered runs perfectly at 60 FPS using the latest version of Citron and latest turnip drivers. You can probably play in Balanced with a few frame drops, but bumping it up to gaming makes it perfectly smooth. Wii U emulation on Android is still pretty new, and I just started trying it out in general, but DuckTales Remastered ran at a perfect 60 FPS when it wasn't compiling shaders. I did have to bump it up to the max profile though, and I turned down the fan so it wouldn't drive me crazy. Sonic All-Star Racing ran between 25 and 30 FPS, so it's playable but not great. Other games like Need for Speed Most Wanted and Bayonetta 2 crashed, so I think it's just the emulator that needs work. It's still very experimental. Basically, with the Snapdragon G3x Gen 2, you will only be limited in terms of emulation performance to the current emulator compatibility on Android. I'll definitely do more game testing for my final review. Overall, the Pocket Ace is a very comfortable handheld, even though it has relatively flat ergonomics. The weight is reasonable. My unit weighs 322 grams, which is a little over 11 ounces. It's got a bit of heft to let you know you're holding something solid, but nowhere near feeling heavy and fatiguing. The size is also perfect for my medium-sized hands, small enough to be travel-friendly but not so small that my hands will cramp in a few minutes. The D-pad and face buttons are positioned perfectly for D-pad-centric gaming, and the shoulders and triggers are easily accessible. Your thumbs don't hit the sticks playing D-pad-centric games, which means they're there when you need them and stay out of the way when you don't. The front bottom edge is tapered, and I think this really helps with ergonomics because it doesn't cut into your palms. Devices with back grips are nice because they give you something to hold on to, but sometimes they can be a little over-prescriptive with how you're expected to hold it. What I like about the flat back of the Pocket Ace is you can position your fingers however you want. Sometimes I just have my fingers straight out, resting on the back, and other times I'll use my pinkies to prop up the device. I'll do some more long-term testing with and without the grip, but I have a feeling I'm going to end up not using it. While the Pocket Ace is excellent for D-pad-centric gaming, it gets complicated with more modern games that use the analog sticks. While I'm happy the sticks are Hall effect and are much better than Switch sticks, the reality is that they still feel like Switch sticks. What I mean by that is I showed Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube earlier, and although I can fully play that game, I'm used to being able to play that first level a certain way, and with these sticks, I found it difficult to precisely control Sonic. The sticks feel a little twitchy, which made me go from trying to make small adjustments to smoothly maneuver Sonic while wall running to get that 10-ring bubble, and I ended up basically running right around it. Here, coming off the grind rail and running up the ramp, I was trying to make a small adjustment and ended up running right off the right side. Very frustrating. Games like Metroid Prime Remastered are playable because of the aim snapping when you pull the left trigger, otherwise I think this game would be unplayable just trying to use the stick to aim. It's also a little awkward to play games that require the sticks and triggers at the same time because I have to shift my hand down to comfortably use the stick, but then my index finger has to stretch to hit the shoulders and triggers. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good about the AYANEO Pocket Ace so far. However, there are some issues I want to specifically call out, most of which AYANEO should be able to fix with software updates. For the speakers, the community has reported a noticeable jump in loudness between volume level 2 and 3. I've reproduced the issue here, and you can see from level 1 to 2, it goes from about 56 decibels to about 64, an increase of 8 dB. But when I go from level 2 to level 3, it jumps to 78 dB, a 14 decibel increase, almost double the previous delta. Going to level 4 only increases it to about 79 dB, and every increase after that only ups it by about 2 or so dB. So it's very odd why there is such a big jump, and I'm hoping AYANEO can fix this in an update. Okay, let's talk about the new vibration motor. AYANEO has a whole section of their marketing materials around the new linear motor, none of which I really understand, but should basically mean that it's improved. And yes, it does feel great in hand, but there's a bigger issue here. For some reason, whenever the vibration motor is active, the controller inputs are either delayed or input signals are dropped completely, and I'll show you how this issue affects you during gameplay. Here we have God of War on PS2, and in this game you can perform multiple attacks to build up your combos. On the lower left, I turned on the show controller input setting, so whenever I press a button, it'll show what I pressed. So if I spam the square button for my normal attack, you can see it flashes for every button press, and if I hold it down, it'll stay static. Now I'll load a save state where I'm fighting multiple enemies. I won't touch the analog stick to move, just stay in place and attack. When I hit enemies or get hit, the game will vibrate. As I spam the square button, you can see the controller input flash a few times, then stay static as if I'm holding the button down like I showed earlier. It does this each time the device vibrates, and I can get 1 or 2 inputs recognized between long strings of vibrations. If I stop attacking and don't get hit, I can still attack as fast as I want, but as soon as I hit something, it stops working as expected. I'll disable vibration completely and load my save state, and now I can spam my attack and everything works as expected. I also ran the same test with my 8BitDo Ultimate 2 Bluetooth controller and kept the vibration motor on the Ace turned on. If I spam my attack button, the vibration motor on the device activates when I hit an enemy, but I don't get that same input issue from my wireless controller. You can see the controller input logging flashes with each button press no matter what's going on. The attacks perform as expected, and I can build up my combo chain, and it behaves the same as if I had turned off vibration and was using the onboard controls. So there's some kind of issue here where running the vibration motor interferes with the onboard controller input signals. Personally, I don't play with vibration on, but this might be a deal breaker if you like having this enabled. It's very disappointing since this new linear vibration motor was one of the core features promoted for the Ace, and hopefully AYANEO can fix this with a future update. I won't beat a dead horse about the sticks, but again I wish the sticks were a little bigger. I think I'm just spoiled by the full-size sticks on the Pocket Evo, but I understand why they couldn't use those for the Ace since it's so much smaller. I will still do further testing with the other stick caps and rubber covers, and maybe try borrowing my RP Minis caps and report back in my final review. I'll also try to not complain too much about the stick placement, since I'm sure I would be saying the exact opposite if the D-pad were on the bottom and the left stick up top. It just comes with the territory of trying to play multiple generations of games on a single handheld. For the screen, overall I think this is an excellent IPS panel with good colors and minimal light bleed. But I think for this price point, starting at $339 for the base model on Indiegogo and $599 for this Retro Power model, I would have liked to see an OLED panel or at least a higher refresh rate panel like 120Hz. 60Hz is acceptable and everything you would want to play can hit that frame rate, but I would consider it the bare minimum in today's market. If we had a 120Hz panel, we could take advantage of black frame insertion in RetroArch or even just run Android games at those higher refresh rates. The last issue I'll talk about doesn't appear to be isolated to just the Pocket Ace, as I see reports for the Pocket Evo as well. But with the latest software update, the Google Play Store crashes whenever you attempt to use any controller input at all. You can only use touch, moving the stick or pressing the D-pad will immediately crash the app. This should be fixed pretty quickly, but I did still want to call it out as a current issue you might run into. Let's start wrapping up with my likes and dislikes of the AYANEO Pocket ACE. Overall, I like the fit and finish of the device. People may hate on AYANEO's smudgy plastics, but they feel the most premium to me and are super comfortable. The weight makes you think you're holding something rock solid and durable without feeling heavy. The device has great ergonomics and the controls are perfectly positioned, at least for D-pad centric gaming. The speakers sound good to me and aren't covered by your hands. The Snapdragon G3x Gen 2 is a great chip that can play anything you can currently play on Android. However, while I do like the ergonomics for D-pad centric games, analog stick gaming leaves a lot to be desired. A minor nitpick is that I wish the grip case was perfectly color matched with the device, at least the retro power colorway. It's slightly off color and looks a little weird. I'm not sure why they couldn't make it the same color. It would have also been nice if AYANEO made the grip reversible so we could cover the screen for travel, but I guess that's what the two bags are for. And I really hope AYANEO fixes the vibration issue. It's a major flaw on what is otherwise an excellent device, and could be a deal breaker for some. So what do you think about the AYANEO Pocket ACE? Let me know in the comments section below that like button. My overall first impressions are that this is a really well made, powerful little handheld that feels super premium. It has the power of the Pocket Evo, but is a little closer to the size of the Pocket Micro, which makes it more travel friendly, and I'll be taking the ACE and my F1 Pro with me on a trip soon. I plan on doing a teardown and mod video in a few weeks, and a final review next month after I've had some more time with the device, where I'll do more performance and battery life testing, and long-term ergonomics testing with the grip and stick caps. If AYANEO fixes the issues I've talked about, I'll be sure to mention those as well. If you have any games you want me to test out or anything else you want me to cover in my final review, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and have a great day.